In August of 1988, Paul Benovitz was found cowering behind sandbags in his own home, convinced that aliens were injecting him with chemicals through the walls and that his wife was controlled by them. Paul was once a brilliant physicist who had held NASA contracts and was now barricaded in his Four Hills mansion, pointing loaded weapons at shadows. This is where most people would end the story. Another guy who went too far, who lost his mind and paid the price. But Paul Benovitz's story doesn't end there, it only begins at that point. This has to be one of the most unbelievable stories that there is. I even read a book for this video. I read a book. I've never done that ever. The case of Paul Benovitz is not just a case of a scientist who went too deep and lost his grip on reality. It is something far more sinister, something far more calculated, and far more disturbing than I, a little bootlicker, would imagine. What are you doing, Frankie? Digging in the trash? She's digging in the trash right now.
Chapter 1. Who is Paul Benovitz?
In 1979, Paul Benovitz was living the American dream from his home in Albuquerque's exclusive Four Hills neighborhood, just down the street from a very popular location,
308 Negra Arroyo Lane, Albuquerque, New Mexico, 87104.
Paul was successful and respected. He wasn't just a crackpot conspiracy theorist. He held a master's degree in physics and had served as a radio electronics engineer in the Coast Guard during World War II at just 17 years old. Just a little tiny little baby guy during the war. I mean, he's just probably lied and stuff about his age. A lot of people did that. And after the war, he channeled his expertise into the emerging television industry before founding Thunder Scientific Corporation in 1969. And his company wasn't just successful, it was trusted by NASA, the US Air Force, and other government contracts, entities that all require high security clearance. His company specialized in precision temperature and humidity calibration devices, and they were so accurate that they were used in America's most critical aerospace programs. And by the late 1970s, Thunder Scientific employed 30 people and generated over $1 million in annual revenue, which is an ass load at that time. Convert it for me, Tara. Show him $1979 and $2,025. This is where things start to get interesting. Paul's real genius lay at home in his home laboratory. Visitors in Paul's home described a space filled with transformers humming, reel-to-reel tape, recorder whirring, and oscilloscopes and meters everywhere. All professional-grade equipment that Air Force personnel who later examined it called it sophisticated beyond typical civilian capabilities. It's very important that the Air Force came and investigated it later, by the way. Keep that note in your head. Okay? Hey now. So, Paul Benovitz, pretty smart guy, and also seemingly dangerous. Or at least he was approached as if he were dangerous by many entities. And what made him dangerous is that his whirring transformers and oscilloscopes in his home were located directly adjacent to Kirtland Air Force Base. From his office and his home, he had an unobstructed view into some of America's most sensitive defense installations. For example, the Menzano weapon storage area spread out below him like a vast secret city. And Menzano, if you didn't know, at the time was home to a significant portion of our nation's nuclear arsenal. Cold War shit. And also not just Cold War stuff. There's a lot of nuke talk now as well, so. Anyways, Paul had the perfect storm of circumstances. He was a brilliant physicist, he had state-of-the-art equipment and legitimate access through his businesses to military facilities and defense contracts, and on top of that, he had a front row seat to activities that were never meant to be observed from his house. He could see things you're probably not supposed to see, especially if you have the type of equipment that Paul had. Paul. I had a buddy named Paul. So, he worked at 7 Express in Front Royal, Virginia. High five, Virginians. So that's some context on Paul. Let us set the stage for the cultural status of America, the times of then.
For over 4 months, Watergate has dominated the news media.
This was post-Watergate, post-Roswell hysteria. Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind had just taught an entire generation that the government might be secretly working with aliens while simultaneously covering up their existence from the public. Good movie, by the way. New Mexico wasn't just any state, it was the land of enchantment, transformed into the land of secrets. That whole area down there is scary. Ever since the Manhattan Project, post-World War II, that area became a hotbed of scary things that keep me up at night. Not really, they don't keep me up at night. I sleep like a baby, and I'll never show up late for work. Don't put that in there. Or do, I don't give a I sleep like a baby. I suck. Speaking of Los Alamos, the National Laboratory continued developing weapons that could destroy civilization even post-Oppenheimer, even post-Manhattan Project. Sandia National Laboratories conducted classified research, and White Sands tested experimental aircraft decades ahead of public knowledge. Allegedly. And at the heart of all of this, in this geographical area, this bung pit of fear and science, was Kirtland Air Force Base. For a long time, I read it as Kirkland Air Force Base. While researching this, I was like, Costco, hot dogs and stuff. And then I realized it was Kirtland. I have dyslexia, so I can't read very well. And this sumbitch was on top of the Menzano underground bunkers containing enough nuclear firepower to end the world. Paul Benovitz had built his American dream in the shadow of America's most dangerous secrets. And in 1979, his curiosity would transform his comfortable life into a nightmare that nobody could have ever predicted. And somehow, I'm sure there's a movie about this. There has to be a movie about this. But this is a story that is so crazy that it needs to be talked about more. It should be taught about in schools. No, it shouldn't. It probably shouldn't, but I was homeschooled, if you guys. I gotta stop saying that. Sometimes I'll say that in a video and someone will comment, yeah, I know. Not enjoying this video. Through his curiosity and from his second story deck, Paul was about to witness something that would consume his life, destroy his family, and ultimately reveal a truth even more terrifying than an alien invasion, which is what he revealed.
Chapter 2. The Lights over Menzano.
Beginning in July of 1979, Paul detected unusual electromagnetic signals from his custom-built radio receivers that were calibrated specifically for the 200 hertz frequency range. His antenna array pointed directly at the Menzano weapons storage complex, and he was picking up what he described as modulated pulse transmissions, and he picked them up loud and clear. He noticed coherent patterns which suggested they were encrypted military communications. Using his physics background and electronics expertise, he set up an increasingly sophisticated surveillance system and equipment, including telephoto lenses that were so large they dwarfed his cameras. He also set up 8mm film cameras and the specialized radio receivers we just talked about. And by September of 1979, he had begun systemic 24-hour monitoring and documentation of both visual and electromagnetic phenomena around Kirtland Air Force Base and the Menzano weapons complex. This is a bad idea. Winter of 1979 marked a turning point for Paul Benovitz. His wife Cindy reported being awakened before dawn by their barking dog and hearing a high-pitched buzzing sound in and around their house, which is unusual. Kind of the first thing. By that time, Paul's nightly observations had become systematic. First, he would focus on the Menzano test range, then Coyote Canyon, and nuclear storage areas. And he began compiling what would eventually become hundreds of photographs and over 2,600 feet of 8mm film documenting the phenomena he was witnessing. The objects and incidents he was documenting displayed extraordinary capabilities. Things would disappear and reappear miles away in seconds. These are UFOs, UAPs, whatever you want to call them. They exhibited multicolored lights that floated and swooped about over the most sensitive areas of Kirtland AFB. They would appear as glowing dots over a period of minutes and then suddenly flash brilliantly before taking off to fly around mountains low enough to evade radar. So that's scary to a goober like me, or maybe a goober like you, but for a man with a background like Benovitz, what he's describing has to be pretty interesting. Being a guy who was in a war and an actual professional science man who also looked like this, he looked badass. I mean, check that fit out. Oh my God. If he cares about this stuff, it's not as easily to just dismiss it as some nonsense. You think he would know if it's conventional aircraft or natural phenomena. So now he's a UFO enthusiast, okay? But the technical sophistication of Paul Benovitz's approach absolutely, unequivocally set him apart from typical UFO enthusiasts. He's right next to a government base, and he's looking, not with binoculars or really good prescription glasses, but sophisticated Nikola Tesla stuff. The point is, Paul is not just idly speculating. What's that in the sky? It's a ship! He's applying rigorous scientific methodology to extraordinary observations that he's making and documenting, all using professional grade equipment deployed by a trained physicist. So, take that as you will. Plus, as a defense contractor with legitimate access to Kirtland AFB, Benovitz understood the significance of what he was witnessing. He was witnessing objects with impossible capabilities hovering over America's nuclear arsenal, which represents either an extraordinary threat or evidence of technology well beyond what is publicly known or available. And by 1980, Benovitz had become convinced that he was witnessing something that posed a genuine threat to national security. The evidence was mounting, and the patterns were becoming clear, and the implications were becoming more and more real and terrifying to him. There's aliens, and they're flying over our bases where we have nukes. That seemed to be what his main fears were. Then we fast forward to August 9th of 1980, and his concerns seemed to be validated. Just after midnight, he witnessed yet again something extraordinary happening at the Menzano weapons storage complex, my favorite daytime brunch eatery. 3 Kirtland security guards, along with a Sandia Lab security patrol, witnessed a bright light descend and hover near a nuclear bunker containing HQCR-44 material, which is military code for nukes. Alright. And when one guard approached with a shotgun, his radio failed mysteriously. It ceased to function, which means wizards and magic and stuff. The object was described as round and disc-shaped, and it hovered just a few feet off the ground before it shot straight up and was lost to view in seconds. Which, by the way, at this point, people who see UFOs are all crazy as hell. They're all insane, crazy people. Now there is actual documentation and real videos from FLIR, thermal cameras that have documented this type of stuff, these little tic tacs and things. Like, this is real now. As of 2023, when the disclosure started, now you don't have to be a paranoid schizophrenic to believe this and say this stuff. This is just reality now. This guy was completely right. He saw some shit. Allegedly. All right. The point is, this wasn't just Paul's word anymore. There is corroboration now. You've got a group of people who seen some shit, and the incident was so serious that it resulted in an official AFOSI complaint form that was filed by Special Agent Richard Dodie. So that's a real crystallized incident that happened beyond just Paul that we can use to corroborate future information with, because we're gonna need a lot of that. 4 days later, on August 13th in 1980, every radar facility in the Albuquerque area was simultaneously disabled for nearly 6 hours, from 4:30 p.m. to 10:15 p.m. Military and civilian radar systems all failed, backup systems wouldn't activate, and communication maintenance specialists couldn't explain the interference during this time. And the Defense Nuclear Agency triangulated the jamming signal to inside Kirtland Base near Coyote Canyon, which is the exact location of the UFO sightings that we're talking about. The official AFOSI assessment was pretty scary. It was as follows.
Presence of a hostile intelligence jamming radar cannot be ruled out.
I'm gonna be honest with you, that's really weird, and it's like disembodied, and it sounds weird, and I don't like it. So can you stop that? Before I pull your head off. Put you in my butt. I won't do that, that's weird. I would never do that. Then a little while later, on October 24th, 1980, Paul made a decision that would unfortunately seal his fate. He formally contacted Kirtland Air Force Base to report what he considered a real threat against Menzano weapons storage area by UFOs. You'd think he should have done that, for sure. You'd be like, well, yeah, tell them that they're getting attacked by aliens and stuff. There's like a tic tac flying around, fucking, it doesn't even taste good and stuff. It's just scary. It's just a scary tic tac. But no, this was bad. This was the beginning of the end for Paul, unfortunately. Paul's initial contact with Kirtland AFB was Major Ernest E. Edwards, aka Dr. Fudd. And the major referred him to the AFOSI, or Air Force Office of Special Investigations agent Richard Dodie that we just mentioned a little while ago. This referral was a pretty consequential moment in the life of Paul Benovitz. He didn't know at the time. He figured I should probably tell them, and honestly, he's right, but he was not right. He shouldn't have done that.
Chapter 3, The Rabbit Hole.
Why does your voice sound so cool? Before we move further in this story, we have to take a bit of a step back. There's a seemingly unrelated event that would, in fact, completely convert Paul Benovitz from a concerned observer of mysterious phenomena to a true believer that the end times are nigh and aliens are thine propagating it.
The hell y'all doing back there?
Just a few months before, on May 5th, 1980, a woman calling herself Myrna Hansen reported to Cimarron, New Mexico State Police that she and her son had witnessed two massive silent objects that were approximately the size of Goodyear blimps. Her and her son witnessed these hovering over a meadow near Eagle Nest, which is this location here on this map, and that is related to all these other locations on the map. The police referred her case to Officer Gabe Valdez in Dolce, New Mexico, who immediately contacted Paul Benovitz. Why? I don't know. But Dolce is also very important, by the way. I could make an entire other video about Dolce. And what followed, as a result of what Myrna said, would become the cornerstone of Paul Benovitz's increasingly elaborate theories that got bad. Under hypnosis, which was conducted by a real person by the name of Dr. Leo Sprinkle, a real University of Wyoming psychologist. This was taking place in Paul's garage with his Lincoln Town Car's windows covered with aluminum foil for security reasons. Myrna Hansen revealed a terrifying secret world, a terrifying narrative. She claimed to have witnessed cattle being sucked into a hovering spaceship by a tractor beam. And this was followed by her own abduction story to an underground base with body parts floating in vats, which is wild. Also during this hypnosis session, she spontaneously exclaimed, "Where's Roswell, New Mexico?" Now, for Benovitz, witnessing this hypnosis, it wasn't just another abduction account, it was a corroboration of a larger pattern that he himself had been witnessing and documenting. The underground base, the cattle connection, the proximity to his own observations. For him, everything seemed to really fit together. And the hypnosis session marked a critical escalation in Benovitz's beliefs and his trajectory. This is before he told the AFB about this, but a very important event nonetheless. By June 3rd, 1980, just a few weeks later, when Dr. Sprinkle returned, he found Paul Benovitz armed with both pistol and rifles, expressing urgent concerns about protecting his family from alien threats. The aluminum foil from the original session already suggested a developing level of paranoia about surveillance and some mind control stuff, but the concerns now were on another level. It seemed, though, Paul's concerns were being taken seriously, and they were being taken seriously at the highest levels. On November 10th, 1980, Paul was invited to a remarkable briefing at Kirtland AFB that seemed to validate his entire investigation. The meeting included Brigadier General William Brookshire, who had previously commanded Malmstrom AFB during its own UFO incidents, along with multiple Air Force officers and personnel from Sandia Laboratories. So people who are in the know in regard to this type of stuff. And rather than dismissing his research, the officials advised Benovitz to apply for an Air Force grant to study the phenomena further. And when the approximately $75,000 grant was approved, Paul felt good. He felt vindicated. Paul felt vindicated. All right, bud? Don't make fun of me, you little Who even are you? Where'd you come from? At this point, the United States Air Force was essentially funding Paul Benovitz's UFO research, which is proof, I think, that observations were taken seriously by the highest levels of military intelligence, and this is legit. And unfortunately, one thing Paul didn't know is that this meeting would change everything for him, and not in a good way. At all. Not in a good way, even a little bit. And through the summer of 1980, Benovitz's surveillance intensified. He really got serious with it. He went pro. His equipment captured more video of lights that would perform impossible maneuvers, and his custom radio receivers started picking up what he interpreted as electronic communications originating from alien spacecraft. So not encoded messages from the military, but actual messages from alien spacecraft. And by 1981, he had written a computer program that he claimed could translate these alien transmissions and produce streams of text including messages like,
"We cannot tell military of the U.S. making humanoids."
And also other classic messages like,
"The number of our crashed saucers is 8. Dead boy."
technical veneer, the methodology, the science, the physics, the official rapport, the professionalism from Paul gave these investigations credibility that a pure speculative troglodyte like myself would have lacked. All right, Paul, smart. Paul also documented everything meticulously, and by 1983, he could reference thousands of feet of film, hundreds of photographs, and extensive recordings of all kinds of different phenomena. And his approach to the phenomena was the physicist approach. He was attempting to apply rigorous methodology to extraordinary observations. It's very important to make that clear. Things starting to get very strange in the next chapter, which we'll talk about a little bit right now. But central to Benovitz's evolving worldview of this phenomena was his belief in an underground alien facility near Dolce, New Mexico. This is really important because there's a lot of stories. The War of Dolce, there's a lot of different UFO folklore, Dolce, alien gray, alien white type information, and tall, really interesting tales from this area. So the fact that Paul is directly involved in this, I believe it. In a December 2nd, 1981 letter to Senator Pete Domenici, he claimed to know the location of the alien bases in northern New Mexico in the center of the Apache Reservation 4.5 miles northwest of Dolce, New Mexico. He claimed to have this information. He had supposedly located this base through radio signal triangulation and claimed to possess high-resolution official NASA U-2 CIR, which is color infrared photos that show the base in total detail. How the f he got these? Man, I don't know. How? Any of you guys have any ideas? No? Who even are you? Where'd you come from? Who's this little guy's name? They said his name was Harry Peter. Have you ever woken up with one of your eyeballs laying beside you and wondered, well, that's probably not good? I haven't, but some people probably have. If you have, consider using ZocDoc. It's important to get the care and help that you actually need, and that is where ZocDoc comes in. ZocDoc is a free app and website that can connect you to in-network doctors. You can compare quality and even instantly book an appointment. In-network appointments instantly across 100,000 doctors from every single specialty, whether it be dental or Dr. Pepper, mental health, primary care, urgent care, and more. You can filter by whether or not they take your insurance, where they're located, or if they're a good fit for you. Appointments made through ZocDoc can happen fast, typically between 24 and 72 hours, some even occurring same day. I use ZocDoc and you should too. Stop putting off the doctor's appointment. Just go get a checkup. Go to ZocDoc.com/Oompaville to instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/Oompaville. Thank you, ZocDoc, for sponsoring. And this Dolce base, as it's come to be known in UFO folklore, has been described as a 7-story underground structure beneath Archuleta Mesa, which is operated jointly by aliens and the United States government and government personnel. Pretty cool, sounds cool to me. And according to Benovitz's theories, this facility was the site of genetic experiments creating human-alien hybrids with the vats of body parts that Miss Hansen had described under hypnosis, serving as evidence of these horrific activities. That woman from a little while ago, she described events in Dolce Base, and they up here they making human hybrids with aliens and shit. What in the heck? So Benovitz's theories now expand to encompass a complete narrative of alien-human collaboration, alien and human government collaboration, that also includes my favorite part of UFO folklore, the Dolce War. If you haven't heard of this, strap in. It's pretty wild. It's big lore. Paul, amongst many other people, believed that the US military had made a deal with aliens several years ago, and a sort of gist of it is they traded Indian reservation land and cattle access for advanced alien technology. So you have cattle mutilations and you have the government flying around Tic Tacs or whatever. And they established a base alongside the alienoid creatures, like our boy the Relic down there, and they're testing stuff out in the desert, up to no good. But according to Paul's research, this all ended in total disaster. the Dolce War occurred, which is when humans and aliens went to battle. In Paul's December 2nd, 1981 letter to Senator Pete Domenici, Benovitz detailed what he believed was a catastrophic confrontation that had shattered the human and alien partnership. Paul's version of events goes as follows. The joint underground facility beneath the Archuleta Mesa had become a powder keg of tension between the human military and our government and their alien partners, and the conflict, as Paul understood it, had erupted over weapons technology. Possibly disputes about what humans could access or disagreements about the aliens' advanced armaments. And the confrontation had escalated so rapidly and violently that US military forces were forced to evacuate entirely from the area. And according to the intelligence Paul had gathered, there was a firefight between human forces and the Greys, and it had been catastrophic. He believed approximately 60 people had died in the underground battle, the Dolce War. American military personnel, scientists, and security forces who had been stationed at the joint facility. And the aliens, using their advanced weaponry, had overwhelmed the human defenders, I don't know, whatever you want to call them, in what amounted to be a massacre beneath the New Mexico desert. The Dolce War. How wild is that? And there's people who have testified in court about this. People who were wounded. But that's a whole nother video, though. But anyways, Paul's account to Senator Domenici, his phrase about the final circumstance of the men being unknown, it's not a routine military withdrawal. It was an emergency evacuation from this area where American personnel simply vanished. What are y'all doing? Were they killed, taken prisoner, vaporized with alien weapons like that one movie with Jack Nicholson in it?
I surrender.
Paul claimed to have evidence, but he couldn't get anyone in a position of authority to listen to him. And the aftermath, according to his research, was even more ominous. While the military had fled, the aliens remained and continued their operations from the underground complex without human oversight or control. So the very facility that had been established as a joint venture between humans and aliens was now just aliens jerking it down there, dude, like my boy is here in his ship. Why? Why is his hands so hidden all the time? Also in his letter to Senator Domenici, he wrote about 2 women and a child near Austin, Texas, who were severely exposed to radiation at a close distance from a ship that was in trouble. So these 2 people were near an alien craft and they were irradiated like Chernobyl. He believed these casualties were a result of aliens fleeing the conflict zone. And according to his intelligence, unmarked helicopters had escorted the damaged alien craft westward, while the government quietly paid hospital expenses for the radiation victims and keep the incident covered up. Another thing that our boy Paul was deeply concerned with is the fact that the president had not been totally advised on the situation. That's what he was saying. If his research was correct, alien forces were operating uncontrolled on American territory and former military personnel were missing or dead, and the commander-in-chief had no idea. I think the commander-in-chief at that time didn't have an idea of a lot of what was going on. All right, guys? I don't even know who it was. Who was it? Was it Reagan? 1980? I don't know. So yeah, the Dolce War is a rabbit hole in and of itself, with much detail that should be covered at another video at a later date, but Paul Benovitz is like one of the chief guys behind it. Paul described 2 alien factions that took part in this war and in general were involved with humanity: the peaceful whites and the evil grays, which were responsible for cattle mutilations and human abductions. This is kind of an alien gray, our boy the Holy Relic. He's a green, but they're supposed to be gray and stuff, and then the whites are just like Swedish people or something. I don't have any idea, but these alien classifications were drawing from UFO folklore of the era. There was a lot of information about this back then. There still is. You've probably heard of people talk about Pleiadian star seeds and all that total bullshit. Sorry. Spiritual belief. The Greys are small, thin beings with large black eyes, gray skin, and big-ass heads, and they had become the archetypal alien abductor in UFO literature following prominent cases like the 1961 Betty and Barney Hill abduction case. You've seen them before. Our boy here, I'm sure Tara put one on the screen. They're typically portrayed as emotionless scientists that conduct medical experiments on humans, and there's the alien whites, the Nordic aliens. These, by contrast, are described as tall, pale, human-like beings with blonde hair and blue eyes, and they're often portrayed as more benevolent and spiritually advanced. Anyways, by 1983, Paul Benovitz's beliefs had become more elaborate and technologically sophisticated. I'm talking this guy was getting really out there. He claimed to have established direct communication with aliens through what he called hexadecimal code with graphics, which was a binary computer language that he had programmed to translate what he believed were alien transmissions. So we mentioned this a little bit earlier. It's called Project Beta. So he went from listening to them to now communicating them with a computer that he made, a program that he made. Okay, Terry Davis, your divine intellect is showing. So as hard as that is to believe, you have to say his background as a physicist and electronics expert definitely lends a level of credibility here. You know, I could say I coded it in Unity. People would just laugh at me. I'm in talking to him. For some reason, it's way more impressive when it's 1983. On April 8th, 1983, a UPI wire story published then brought Paul Benovitz's claims to national attention, and it detailed both his 1980 UFO filming over the Menzano weapons storage facility and his extraordinary assertions of ongoing computer-based alien contacts. He was like talking to them. The article described him, a respected scientist and defense contractor who claimed to be downloading information directly from alien sources, which is awesome! Are you kidding me? That's so sick! So he was talking to them and providing detailed technical descriptions of how that contact worked. He spoke of hexadecimal programming languages, computer interfaces, and data transmission protocols as if he's just talking about poop and farts like the rest of us.
Chapter 4. The Unraveling Paranoia.
So we can tell maybe Paul is starting to lose his grip on reality. He's talking to aliens. He's like the first guy ever to talk to aliens, it seems like. Is he talking to aliens? Or is he paranoid and crazy and he's losing his mind? Well, it's honestly somewhere between those two things. But over 8 years, Paul underwent a dramatic transformation. He started off as a successful businessman, a respected scientist, and he gradually became a paranoid recluse who lost his grip on reality and had to be hospitalized. He started off as a concerned citizen and went to a psychiatric patient because of his communication with what he thought were aliens. Over time, he installed increasingly elaborate antenna arrays and monitoring equipment in his home, and he turned it into what observers described as a command center, which sounds badass, but it's sad. It's really sad. And sleep deprivation became chronic due to his maintenance of constant vigilance against the perceived alien threat. Family members at the time reported he wasn't eating, wasn't sleeping, and so on. He was completely consumed by aliens. And the worst part, in my opinion, and what other people who are smarter than me believe, is the computer communications he believed he was receiving were very damaging to his mental state. These messages created what he interpreted as direct contact with extraterrestrial intelligences. Literally aliens. The only guy ever. This is real. This is actually real. And it is real, by the way. It is real. 50 billion. Every decoded transmission reinforced his beliefs and added new layers of complexity to his theories. The aliens were not just present, they were communicating with him directly. He was uniquely burdened and special. He was kind of large and in charge. So he's the chosen messenger of humanity. For some reason, nobody's listening to him. People think he's crazy. And this, combined with the overwhelming responsibility that he felt to warn the world of something coming, it created an enormous psychological pressure, which it makes sense. And his business that he had in the start of this, Thunder Scientific Corporation, suffered as his obsession consumed more and more of his time and energy. Employee numbers dropped from 30 in 1978 to 18 by 1981, with further declines, I assume, as his condition worsened. And the company that had generated over $1 million in annual sales and held prestigious NASA and Air Force contracts became secondary to his alien crusade. Bill Moore, one of Paul's friends who visited him regularly, described him as looking like a concentration camp survivor. And during one 45-minute lunch meeting, Moore counted Paul smoking 28 cigarettes while not touching a single bite of his food. And his hands were trembling constantly, and chronic insomnia had left him gaunt and hollow-eyed like a ghoul. On top of the command center aspect of his home, he also transformed it into a fortress. He kept guns and knives all over the place, and weapons were strategically placed throughout every room. Extra locks were installed on all the doors and windows, and he believed aliens were entering his home nightly through the walls, injecting him with chemicals, all while he slept. So that's probably not as likely. He has a family this whole time, by the way. He has a wife, Cindy, who had supported him through the early years of his research and served as a bookkeeper for Thunder Scientific, and they raised their 2 sons, and she witnessed his transformation gradually from a brilliant physicist she had married in 1949 to a man who would eventually accuse her of being under alien control. And their home in the Fort Hills neighborhood, beautiful, a symbol of success and an achievement of the American dream, had then become a fortress against a perceived threat, an alien threat, potentially imaginary, guys. Was it? Comment down below. What do you think actually happened? Was he really talking to aliens? By 1987, Paul's paranoia reached the final tipping point. He believed the aliens were coming in his home at night and shooting him up full of chemicals. Every unexplained sensation or a moment of confusion or fatigue was attributed to alien interference. The electromagnetic signals he had once recorded scientifically now carried voices and messages, or evidence of direct mental control attempts over him. His reality had been completely replaced or reconstructed after years of obsessive investigation. The breaking point came in August of 1988 after 8 years of escalating paranoia, sleep deprivation, and psychological pressure. Paul Benovitz accused his wife of being controlled by extraterrestrials. In a final desperate attempt to protect himself against the aliens, they said that they were going to invade, they were going to kill everybody, and it was going to end humanity as we know it. He began barricading his home with sandbags around the windows, and it was the end for Paul. Paul's family made the decision to have him committed for psychiatric treatment, and he was admitted to the mental health unit at Presbyterian Anna Caseman Hospital in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where he would remain there under observation for an entire month. And this hospitalization represented an end and a beginning of the ultimate collapse of a man who had been completely consumed by what he believed was his patriotic duty to expose an alien threat. After he got out of the hospital, he remained pretty quiet, and he eventually passed away on June 23rd of 2003 at the age of 75, and he was buried with military honors at Santa Fe National Cemetery, which was in recognition to his service in World War II that defined his early life before his alien phenomenon encounters. For over a decade after his hospitalization, Paul Benovitz remained largely out of the public eye. He retreated into privacy entirely. His family protected him from further scrutiny, and the UFO community moved on to other cases and other researchers and other mysteries. Now, we have one big question here. Was Paul talking to aliens? Yes or no? What do you think? Do you think Paul was talking to aliens? Because it seems like he believed he was talking to aliens, and he had proof of it. He had all this documentation. People didn't think he was crazy in the beginning. There was an official nature to it. He even sat in on a meeting at Kirtland, was given $75,000. It's very legitimate and seems so suspicious. He's just talking to aliens, he loses his mind? Of course. Of course he's a crazy old kook. Wrong. Apparently there were no aliens at all. He was talking to the United States government. They were with him. The United States government was catfishing a man. They made him lose his mind. On the record, this was a disinformation campaign. They with this guy so much that he was hospitalized and his life essentially ended. How do we know this? On July 1st, 1989, at the annual MUFON Symposium in Las Vegas, William Moore, once respected as the co-author of the Roswell incident, stepped to a podium and delivered a confession that shook the UFO folklore community to its core. It's very sad. And it changes everything we know about the Paul Benovitz story. For over 4 years, Moore admitted that he had been working as a government disinformation agent and was deliberately feeding false information to Paul Benovitz and reporting on UFO researchers to intelligence handlers. So it's a psyop. Cool. Paranoid delusions, the alien communications, the underground bases, none of it was real. It was all manufactured and fed to Paul. Now, is that real? I don't actually know, but we have more information. Moore described being approached in September of 1980 by someone he knew only as Falcon, which was later revealed to be the Air Force Office of Special Investigations agent Richard Dodie. Oh, we talked about him. He was early in the story, dude. So in return for real information, they were going to get Moore to spread fake information. And Moore convinced himself that he could play this role of a double agent, and he gained insider knowledge while managing the flow of disinformation into the UFO community. But Instead of this, he became an actual instrument of psychological destruction of a man that he knew personally, a friend. So this guy's a fraud, a huge fraud, or at least he claims. Maybe they're just saying, hey, tell everybody it was a disinformation campaign. So it becomes a disinformation campaign at that time, because there's a lot of information in the 80s that came out for ufology that they say now are not real just because of this. But also you could just look at it from a conspiratorial point of view and just be like, well, of course they say that, because then it's fake. All the information you found out that was real is fake. And if you just have to threaten one guy into saying, I made it up, then you can devalue all of it. I mean, it makes sense. Anyways, we're going to pretend like it's all fake. And it was a disinformation campaign, and the Dolce War was not real. All right, we're going to debunk it. All right. So apparently Moore had been around Benovitz, monitoring his mental deterioration and reporting his findings back to his handlers on the effectiveness of this disinformation and false information. Moore had even authenticated forged documents, totally fake stuff, or so he claimed, knowing that they were fraudulent. This thing, Mystic 12, there's all this lore from the UFO folklore community in the 80s that Bill Moore was like one of the main guys of, and he just totally trashed it all. I don't know, man. He admitted to playing the disinformation game. He became a pariah in the community, and honestly, that guy can go f himself. Richard Dodie's admission, old Falcon, they would come later, but they were a bit more comprehensive. In multiple interviews that he gave in the beginning of 2013, which included appearances in the documentary Mirage Men, Dodie confirmed the essential elements of the operation against Benovitz.
My supervisors told me, listen, we don't want him to go out to the public, go on camera and say, hey, I just tapped into a secret laser on Kirtland Air Force Base. Obviously, we can't have that happen. So all I had to do was say, well, you know what, Paul? Maybe what you did see was UFOs.
The destruction of Paul Benovitz was just another mission for him, and it was executed with the same professionalism as any other counterintelligence operation would have been executed. The sheer scope of what had been done to Paul was mind-boggling. NSA experts examined his equipment during covert visits. They even smuggled in Dr. Robert Fugate, a director of the Starfire optical range, to evaluate Paul's magnetic field detector. And Fugate loved the design of Paul's machine, and the government hadn't even solved the particular problem that Paul had solved in his garage. So Paul was a genius, and they were absolutely with him, it seems. Or were they? I don't know, dude. It's hard to tell now at this point. But the technical aspects of the operation were incredibly elaborate. The AFOSI had installed electronic surveillance equipment in a vacant house across the street from Benovitz's home. They beamed artificial signals to his receivers and crafted alien messages that his computer programs would decode. And insidiously, in the summer of 1981, they supplied him with a specialized computer system that included software that was allegedly modified by a renowned UFO researcher, J. Allen Hynek, at Air Force request. And the program was designed to produce gibberish when decoding intercepted signals, which created a false confirmation of alien communications while preventing Benovitz from analyzing actual military transmissions. So this guy was looking at an Air Force base and collecting all this information, and they were just sending him shit. They were surrounding him with diarrhea. The message, "We cannot tell military of the US making humanoids," they were all crafted to reinforce Paul's existing beliefs and adding new layers to his paranoia. The 75 grand they gave him, it was actually funding for the disinformation campaign against him. Every dollar was being used to finance his own psychological destruction. So if we are to believe that Paul was actually the victim of an entire disinformation campaign, it sort of makes sense because he's right up there against the base and maybe he sees a light and then he just starts collecting secret government information. That seems bad. But like, maybe tell him to stop. And just be like, hey, you're breaching national security. Instead of fucking convincing him that there's aliens for 8 years. Why would you do that? That doesn't make any sense. Why are you convincing him that there's aliens? You are all insane. Sure, it's a security risk, but like, tell him to stop. I'm sure he'd listen. In the beginning, what Benovitz was actually observing, the lights and all the crazy stuff, would later officially be revealed as some of America's most sensitive defense programs. Behind the Menzano Mountains at Kirtland AFB, the Starfire optical range was conducting satellite surveillance operations under Dr. Robert Q. Fugate's direction, okay? This facility could track basketball-sized objects at over 1,000 miles distance using these adaptive optics and sodium lasers that create artificial guide stars or 90 kilometers above Earth. They're bright, maneuverable lights that could easily be mistaken as alien craft. Now, I didn't know this shit existed until doing the research on this, and I feel like if we had that in the 80s, what the f do we have now? That seems crazy. Even more classified was Project Rainbow Tabor Orange, which is a satellite interception program that uses laser communication systems to reprogram Soviet surveillance satellites in orbit. So they were doing some crazy shit, and old Paul was watching. He was tuning right into it, and they're like, hey man, let's make this guy go crazy. Oh yeah, also the NSA was testing experimental signal compression technology, multiple encrypted signals that were transmitted on a single carrier wave, and Paul Benovitz's custom 200 hertz receivers were perfectly calibrated to intercept these and harshly or crudely decompress components of them, and NSA experts would later admit it was their multi-million-dollar electronic house of cards that old Paul Benovitz was crumbling. So yeah, we've got Paul, who seems really innocent in all this, seems really sad. We've got Bill Moore, who seems like a liar and is a disinformation agent, a pariah of the UFO community. And we have Richard Dodie, who is basically Satan, all right? And his revelations, his operational details that he provided were a lot more than what Bill Moore had said at that UFO Mufasa, whatever the f it's called, MUFON. Terrible name, MUFON. Horrible. Richard Dodie described creating forged documents that became central to UFO mythology, including the infamous Aquarius papers and MJ-12 documents, the Majestic 12. He also confirmed planting false evidence at alleged UFO sites and coordinating the installation of props at Archuleta Mesa to simulate an underground base. So that is a lot of deception. I don't know if that's real. It seems like a really strange thing to admit to if it's not real, but also seems really convenient. Like, I don't know, this is crazy. This is a mind-boggling story. Benovitz and Dodie weren't the only two. The UFO research community had been entirely infiltrated and manipulated for some reason. I feel like, why would you do that, though? No, why would you do that unless there's something there? It just doesn't really make any sense. Let them be crazy. Let them just go run around and be like, hey, alien! Hey, man, it's just Starlink. It's just Starlink. Everything's just Starlink now. But anyways, they created this thing called the Aviary, which that's how Richard Dodie got his dope-ass Falcon name, which the Aviary is supposed government insiders in the UFO community with bird code names. It's a comprehensive disinformation strategy, and multiple researchers received variations of the same false documents and nonsense that was fed to Paul Benovitz, and I don't know, it's really bad and evil though. And some FOIA releases that were included in the 2013 Mirage Men documentary, the same one that Dodie talked on, confirmed Dodie's role as the special agent who was investigating Benovitz, and the document showed high-level Air Force officials, including Brigadier General Brookshire, had participated in meetings with Benovitz. And most revealing was correspondence that showed that when Senators Harrison Schmitt and Pete Domenici, the guy that Paul kept trying to get into contact with, when they inquired about the Benovitz investigation, they were told no investigation existed, which proved the deception extended to congressional oversight. So it's like this, it doesn't make any sense. Who did this? Who signed off on this? Dodie consistently maintained until his death that he was just following orders from his AFOSI superiors, but the Air Force has never acknowledged sanctioning the operation, and no documentation has emerged showing formal approval for a psychological disinformation warfare campaign that entirely broke a human being's brain. So yeah, pardon the skepticism, pardon the distrust of the government, but like, this is apparently real. So anyways, press the like button, hit the subscribe button, go to sour.gg, buy some candy, and go to the Gump Club to watch this video uncensored with extra behind the scenes content. I will see you guys in the next one.